For the second part of our introduction to the Capture Consulting Offers Kickoff, I'm going to talk about the big picture of landing a consulting job. This is really the beginning of establishing that consulting hiring bar. What are some of the key ingredients that firms are looking for in their candidates? And then shaping a little bit of the structure that we're going to use around the roadmap for interview preparation. I think it's just really important to think about the type of candidates that consulting firms are seeking. I think one of the best ways to describe the type of professionals that consulting firms want to hire, it's really Olympic level general athletes. In some ways, it's the decathlete. It's not the sprinter or the high jumper or the slalom skier. Those skills are amazing and incredible, but they're also extremely specialized. There are some roles for that level of specialization within a consulting firm, but I think at a higher level, you have to have at least some breadth of experience. So, what do I mean by Olympic level? It's in some ways simple to think about. In the Olympics, you're competing on a world stage. You're competing with athletes who are the top athletes from their country. They're the best of the best, and now you're competing against each other. The gold, silver, and bronze medal are awarded to the top three out of a group of incredibly talented athletes. Consulting works the same way. The type of individuals that get an opportunity to interview for consulting roles, they're very talented. Their resumes and their experience are incredibly well developed, incredibly deep, really established, have had success. And so you're trying to be distinctive within a group of incredibly talented professionals. And so shaping your interview preparation with that theme in mind can help elevate and really focus the type of things that you're going to be doing to get to that level of distinctiveness. I think the second key ingredient to establish your levels of preparation, it's really around your mindset. One, having a great deal of optimism. Preparation is magical. It can do a lot of things to build your capabilities for the interview process and really thinking positively about your candidacy. Having that positive self-talk and really thinking about the type of impact that you can have as a consultant, how you would fit, thinking about your accomplishments of the past. Now, it certainly is important to also know the assets of your background as well as the liabilities. Where you may have, quote, some weaknesses in your candidacy, by thinking about those and knowing about it and having some ways that you can overcome those or speak to them in an effective way, that's going to serve you well in the long run. So I will talk to students and professionals who might say something like, my GPA at the undergrad level, maybe it wasn't as strong, or the companies that I've worked for, their names are not well known. Those may not be deal breakers. They may certainly be a liability in one respect. However, thinking about how you can translate them and talk about them in a more positive way, that's going to help your candidacy. Perhaps after having not the most academically successful undergraduate experience, you went on to graduate school and you were more successful there. Those things can link together and form a very positive impression. Maybe you've worked for companies that don't have household names, but your role there was very substantial, the impact that you were able to create. That says something about who you are as a professional and really seizing opportunities regardless of the organization that you're a part of. Don't let some of those liabilities set you into a place that doesn't put you as competitively as another candidate. Really think about how you can talk to them and turn them into assets. In terms of the skills that consulting firms are looking for, there's 4 things that I focus on. The first is presence, the second is thinking, the third is impact, we've spoken to that a little bit already, and then the fourth is focus. Presence is actually something that is very important to consulting firms and is critically evaluated in a variety of different ways. The people skills that you have, the communication skills, and your look are all important. Consulting is professional services. It's client facing. How you interact with other individuals, how you speak, and how credible you look is something that's important as part of building client relationships, building trust. So that piece is actually evaluated in a number of different ways. The second thing, obviously, because your job is doing analysis and problem solving and thinking strategically, your way of thinking is going to be tested. Initially, this is looked at based on some of your historical activities, your academic performance, internship and work experiences, volunteer experiences, and what type of things that you've done to solve problems. The third thing then is impact. I've spoken to that in the prior video. The type of leadership that you've demonstrated, the accomplishments that you've had. When have you been able to work with others and get them excited about an opportunity and then led them towards some type of achievement, some type of goal achievement? Leadership across all consulting firms is something that's evaluated over and over again. And then the fourth area of focus, it's also the fit dimension. How clear are you about why consulting is the right career for you? What are your professional goals and how does consulting fit into that? And what do you know about consulting as a career and what type of work you're going to be doing with clients? I know in my own experience, especially when I was recruiting with consulting firms, I would talk to students at recruiting events and I might hear something like, I really want to be in consulting because I want to impact the strategy of companies. And then I would simply ask, well, what does that mean to you? What does impacting the strategy? What type of engagement? What type of project? What do you think you might be delivering to the client? And through those follow-up questions, sometimes I might not get the best clarity of answer. That showed me that perhaps that individual had not yet done their homework. And so the more that you can do that, the better off you're going to be in the various interactions you have with the consulting firms. So these four things are tested in multiple ways. Certainly, there's a great deal of networking that goes on and talking to the various consultants. It's going to be shown in your resume. You're going to submit a cover letter that talks to some of these things. You're going to get experience questions in the interview process. And then, of course, you're going to have to solve cases on the spot. And all of those things come together and they shape the evaluation of the candidate. Along the way, the interview process is testing consulting's essential skills. There's many different things that consultants must have in their skill set, in their toolkit, but I really organize them into the four main ones here. The first is the communication skills. Because influence and presentation and interacting with clients is so important in the job, that's really one that stands out. The second is around project management. Now, many strategy consultants are not project managers per se, but there are many different things that you're juggling on a client engagement. And so having that skill set can be important. The third then are the client skills. Many of you have had previous experience where you've worked with clients. The consulting relationship, because of that aspect of being a trusted advisor and also the criticality of the issues that you're working on and the often challenge of clients that are sometimes very concerned, very uncertain, the dynamic with clients can be very complicated in this level of consulting. And so those skills are really probed deeply during the interview process. And then, of course, at the center are your problem-solving skills. How you think about a problem, how you organize, and then how you attack it, and how you gather the right type of analytic information to be able to provide solutions for that problem that you're facing. Through that, you will put together various analysis and answer various questions that are related to the problem that you're focused on. I've given a client example here from a project that I worked on. We were looking at an enormous business model change, and one of the things that we were trying to understand is if we took one of the paths as our option, there were several different business model options, what might be the outcome of that choice and how much risk would that introduce in the process? And through that, I looked at the salary changes for person A versus person B in the new business model. And in presenting this to the client, we were able to show what the impact on their employee population might be, and in the long run, how that might affect the overall change as opposed to the current state. Putting together the analysis, there's an immense amount of data that was looked at. There was a hypothesis or a question that was tested. And then once the analysis was completed, there was a thinking about what it meant and then how we would present it to the client. Bringing all of those skills together is something that you have to be able to demonstrate. The interview process really attacks those essential skills. In communication, you're going to be asked to do something, for example, like a resume walkthrough. Can you succinctly identify the core elements of your background? You also might be asked about how you prioritize. That gets at your project management skills. There are choices that have to be made, and how do you think about that? Your client skills might be addressed through a question looking at your influence. When you've had a client who was very opposed to a change that you were talking about, how did you handle that client, and how did you work through that, influencing them to be comfortable with the change that was being discussed? And then, of course, the problem-solving attribute is going to be looked at within the case interview. There may be some experience questions, but you're actually going to be given a problem and asked to think about how you would solve that problem, and do so on a real-time basis during the interview. Those things are tested, and they're a major focus of the interview process. So in addition to those 4 core skills that the interview process is going to be testing, there's also a broader range of skills that you're going to be needing to demonstrate throughout the interview process. So I've broken these down into 3 groups, 3 categories: the job-related skills, the fit skills, and then those skills that might be a bit unique to the firm or the particular role within the consulting firm. So the job-related skills are kind of those core, essential, foundational elements that you need to have to do the job of a consultant: leadership, initiative, accomplishments, problem-solving, analytic skills, multitasking, communication, and then teamwork. Those are table stakes in a way, and your interview experience is really going to probe on those pretty deeply. The second area then is the fit. Not only the nature of the consulting role, but in general, big picture, are you someone who has the broad ability to act and look and integrate your perspective into the work of a consultant? So presence, which is something I mentioned previously, your issue understanding of the business environment. What are some of the major trends? What are corporate global organizations facing within the various functions that are in a business organization? Marketing, operations, finance, risk management, product development, innovation. What are some of the key trends? And also your broad and global knowledge. The business environment today is very global. And how does that influence what's going on in industry and then also at a particular client? And then, of course, there's the particular firm. Each firm has its way of doing things, its culture, the way that the roles are shaped, the expectations. It's important to know that at the firm level. And then within that, each firm may be looking for some particular skills from you. It could be that that firm focuses on an industry. Perhaps your interest is healthcare or energy. There are firms that have that expertise, or they have practices within the firm that have that expertise. And so how do you demonstrate your knowledge of that industry in a very broad way? What are the technical skills or perhaps the technology skills? Are you someone who's multilingual? Do you have certain certifications, certain educational backgrounds? Those things are going to be particular to the role that you're pursuing. In general, you can think about the broad skills that you have to demonstrate, but then as you get into the interview process with any given firm, you're going to also have to know what that particular firm is looking for. Along the way, landing a consulting job, it's an uphill journey in some ways. It can be tiring. The preparation windows are quite long, but it is absolutely possible to get an offer based on the preparation and the background that you have. But I think one of the things that I emphasize in my work, and it's one of the things that motivated me to do this type of work and to deliver these workshops, is that I often saw really talented students and professionals that I would call a false negative. What that meant was I knew that they had the capabilities to be a great and successful consultant. But in the interview process, they just didn't bring it. They weren't as prepared. They didn't know how to talk about their experience. Some of the fundamental elements of doing the case interview were missing. The takeaway from that is be prepared, be methodical, and put together the right building blocks. Be successful in securing your job offer. As we continue talking, there's going to be various elements that are highlighted to help build that stairway to success, to showing one, that you're a great candidate, and that number two, you have the skills and capabilities to do the job. I've laid out a few of these characteristics here in what I call the stairway to success. Again, when I think about case studies of various students and professionals, these are some of the common things that I see over and over again. It begins at the lower left with the academic strength, the type of degree, your academic performance. Also, those who've worked for blue chip companies, that can be helpful via the brand reputation of that firm, via the expectation of the robustness of the roles. Also, having well-rounded experience, working on a variety of issues, a variety of projects, a variety of different parts of the organization, that can help. Also, those that have more of a business orientation, it just helps you progress a little bit faster. Those of you listening to this that may not be your background, don't be dissuaded. It is something that can be overcome, but it means that there's a little bit of extra work that you have to do to maybe translate your experience into a business orientation. Also, one of the key ingredients that I find are those individuals that have high drama experiences. What this means is that you've worked on challenging projects, you've worked in ambiguous environments, you've worked in complex, multifaceted environments, whether it's multifunction teams, multicultural teams, those sorts of things. So those dramatic elements, what they do is they add flavor to the various experiences that you're going to talk about in the interview. And that just makes for a better interview. The next ingredient is what I call the blue ribbons. These are awards and accomplishments and those things that are selective, whether it's a scholarship or a performance award or a leadership position. Being able to talk about those blue ribbons is important because consulting firms look for professionals that have that element in their background. Also, your ability to apply theory. So there are academic courses that you've taken in your education. Having the ability to translate that and apply it, particularly within the case interview, that becomes important. As much as clients want real-world, applicable, practical solutions, they also want to know that the thinking really is grounded in the best possible way, and that best possible way is often some of the theoretical foundations. You also need to be someone who's a quick calculator. The consulting interview process, because it uses cases, there's analytic pieces, being able to do what we call fast math is important. The next element is your presence, how you look, how you sit, how you display confidence. And then finally, the commitment. The individuals I find over and over and over again who are successful, they have a level of commitment, they have a level of focus, and their attention is directed at that goal, which is to get a consulting offer. So the point of presenting this stairway to success is really this. If you have an area that is squeaky, it's a squeaky stair, which means maybe it's not as strong as another candidate, what you can then do is think about another dimension of your background and reinforce that squeaky stair with that other stair that's really strong. So it's something to begin to think about in terms of how you build your resume and how you talk about your experiences. Something else that I've observed in my experience as a career advisor and working with students and professionals is that there's a couple of dimensions, I think, that shape your success in getting offers. So I've built this into a 2x2 and a way to kind of think about who you are as a candidate. On the vertical axis on the left, we have the level of preparation and focus. Right now, that is completely within your control. How much preparation, how much dedication, how hard do you work? If you want to quantify it, it could potentially be the number of hours, the number of cases, something like that. I don't always believe that quantity is the best measure, but it's certainly the most obvious one. Those who prepare and are focused tend to have the most success. That's not always the case in an absolute sense, but it certainly is a key ingredient. Then on the horizontal axis on the bottom, there is a dimension of robustness and how business and consulting like your experience is. Even when I consider myself as a candidate, when I was pursuing consulting, the corporate roles that I had prior to getting my MBA were very consulting like. I worked on projects, I worked on problems, I worked with internal clients. And so translating my experience was not a big leap because I could very easily use the language of the consultant because my work was very similar. When you have high preparation and high robustness, it's a very easy fit. And securing that consulting offer, assuming that you execute well, it's not that far out of reach. But maybe if your experience is less business-like, less consulting-like, so that you're on the low dimension of that element, then the level of preparation needs to be higher. I've seen some students with really specialized backgrounds who were incredibly focused and gained a really nice way to map their background to the consulting environment, do great things, receive multiple offers. Think about this as you determine your commitment to preparing for the consulting interviews and then also your profile. As I conclude this discussion, I want to offer a couple of areas for suggestion as you begin to build your game plan for preparing for consulting interviews. There's an enormous amount of information that you can be looking at, but I've identified a few of my favorite things here in terms of reading and references. There's a number of great books that talk about the consulting industry. I've listed a few here: The Trusted Advisor, Principles of Effective Consulting, The McKinsey Mind, The World's Newest Profession. Those are all great books to begin to build out your understanding of consulting and the consulting profession. And then in general, to build your business acumen, your business knowledge. Really, any books that talk about companies or industries. There's great books about Nike and Starbucks and FedEx and General Electric and so on and so on. The list goes on and on. Pick up a few of those and build them into your routine. There's also some great books by Malcolm Gladwell that are very short and very interesting and very pointed. Jim Collins has several books, Good to Great and Built to Last, and others that are really interesting and provide a nice context for perhaps some of your conversations. And then there's also some skill-based books. If perhaps the job search process is unfamiliar to you or you haven't done it within the context of the caliber of professionals that consulting firms are looking at, some of the material by Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits, it's great. Larry King has a wonderful book that I think is great for networking, how to talk to anyone, anytime, anywhere. And then there's some neat books by Patrick Lencioni. These are simply a short snapshot of some of my favorite ones. That list could be much longer. Really build this into your routine and integrate it into your preparation, especially if you have a long horizon before you're going to actually get into the interview process. In terms of action items at the start, and these are going to be some of the things that we focus on in the initial workshop session at the kickoff, there's really 3 questions that you want to have very crystal clear answers. The first is, why are you interested in consulting? The second is, why are you interested in our firm? Obviously, your answer is going to be different for each firm, but knowing that is essentially important. And then third is, tell me about yourself. You have to have an ability to speak to your skills and then very concisely give an overview of your background. If you've not done this already, start to meet people who are consultants or former consultants, whether they're alumni, whether they're a part of the organization that you work with, whether they're students who've had internships. Start to talk to them and really just learn about the experience that they've had. Have them reflect on the project working within the team? What are their reflections on the firm and how the firm operates? Get that perspective. It will serve you well in the long run. You're also very shortly going to begin to shape your resume. If you've started on this already, wonderful. So there's two things that you can be doing in your resume. One is honing it around the consulting skills that will be looked for. The second is using it as a gap analysis. If there's experience that you lack, go get it. You still have time to do that before your interviews begin, possibly. And then you can create an action plan. Because we're kicking off these sessions winter, we have plenty of time to prepare, and you have a nice runway to begin to fill in before the full-time interviews. Think about what you're going to be doing for case preparation, your behavioral preparation, what projects you could potentially take on, what leadership roles, and then build that action plan. And then if you happen to have some type of an internship or a current set of projects that you're working on, really excel at that. Make a lasting impact. If you're in an internship situation, go get an offer, build relationships, and use whatever work experience you're getting to incrementally add to the portfolio that you currently have in place. And then finally, as we conclude this introduction, it's really a time to start asking yourself some interesting self-assessment questions. One, what is your motivation? Why is consulting something that you want to do? What is the purpose you feel as a business person? What are the types of things that you want to influence and impact? And then, are you the kind of person who wants to make things happen in a really assertive way? Those tend to be the profile, the behavioral characteristics of the successful consultants, the candidates that the firms are really excited about making offers to. And so the more you understand that about yourself, the more you likely are to be a candidate of interest for the consulting firms.